Good afternoon, everyone, on this Friday afternoon, Friday, June 13th. On behalf of the board and staff at IMFG, I'd like to welcome you to the third annual IMFG address by regional CAOs. This one is entitled Community Building in Uncertain Times, Agility in Regional Government. I'd also like to welcome those of you who are joining us virtually through our live stream. I assume you're sitting on a patio somewhere with your computers in front of you enjoying this event. As many of you know, my name is Enid Slack, and I'm the director of the Institute on Municipal Finance and Governance at the School of Cities here at the University of Toronto. Before we begin, I wish to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I would also like to thank our IMFG external funders, Havana Capital, Maitree, the City of Toronto, and the regions of York, Durham, Peel, and Halton. I'd also like to thank a few people who put this event together. Dina Grazer, who's here, who was our interim manager when we started along this road. Kobud Kandan-Barani, who's now our manager of programs and research here at IMFG, and Piali Roy, all of whom really make this event work. And of course, Adam Bell and his team here at the Monk School. Thank you. If you are posting comments on LinkedIn or other social media platforms, our hashtag is IMFG Talks. Here at IMFG, regional governance has long been a topic of keen interest. And in today's climate of uncertainty, this year's theme, agility in regional government, feels especially timely. That's why we're so pleased to continue what has now become an annual tradition, bringing together regional CAOs for a thoughtful conversation about the challenges and opportunities facing our regions. We're delighted to have the CAOs of York, Peel, and Durham Regions with us today and are looking forward to a rich and insightful discussion. So welcome Erin, Gary, and Elaine, who are sitting up here. My role is pretty straightforward and simple today. I get to introduce the moderator and then sit down. Our moderator today, and I'm happy to introduce him, is Gabe Edelman. He's got a lot of things up here, and he said I shouldn't say them all, but he's actually associate professor in the teaching stream here at U of T in the Monk School, and he's also the director of the Urban Policy Lab. What he wants me to say, of course, though, is that he is IMFG's first faculty fellow. But I also want to add that he's one of the series editors for the Institute's highly acclaimed Who Does What series. So, Gabe, over to you.
Thank you, Enid, and welcome everyone. As Enid said, my name is Gabriel Edelman. Feel free to call me Gabe. Faculty fellow here at IMFG and a faculty member here at the Monk School as well. It's really my pleasure to be here today to moderate this fantastic panel on community building in uncertain times from the perspective of regional governments. The focus of today's conversation is agility, how local governments, specifically regional municipalities, are dealing with growing challenges that are coming at them fast. And we have a great panel of CAOs to walk us through how their respective regions are faring in these uncertain times, as well as the greater Toronto area as a whole, and I hope the conversation goes there as well. Our speaking order is organized geographically, if I have this correct. Starting out east, we have Elaine Baxter-Trahair, CAO of Durham Region, which is made up of 8 local municipalities, for those counting at home, and it's home to more than, I think close to 800,000 residents now, a number expected to go up past the 1 million mark pretty soon over the coming years. Elaine was appointed CAO in Durham in 2018 and now leads approximately 5,000 regional staff after having worked for many years at the City of Toronto, including as a deputy city manager. Welcome, Elaine. Moving west, we have Erin Mahoney, CAO of York Region, home to 1.2 million residents, as from my count, across 9 local municipalities. Erin was appointed CAO in 2023 and has a background in engineering, she's put to good use in prior roles as York Region's Commissioner of Public Works, as well as Commissioner of Environmental Services, and now oversees the entire regional machinery of governments, including more than 5,000 public servants. And finally, we have Gary Kent, CAO of Peel Region, home to more than 1.5 million residents and counting, and I'll make sure to explain why I'm pointing out these residence totals in a moment, and as well more than 5,000 regional staff. Gary was appointed CAO in 2023 after serving as Peel's Chief Financial Officer, building off of 25 years of service at the city of Mississauga. Now, if you're wondering where our CAO friends from Halton Region or Waterloo Region or Niagara Region are, my apologies, the stage is just a bit too small to invite everyone. But really, if you think about it, it wouldn't have been a very smart idea to have so many CAOs together all in one room. Just these 3 fine folks, and I recognize we have another CAO here from Toronto as well. All these fine folks keep our essential services humming along, making sure the water flows from our taps, garbage is collected, and so on. For just among these 3, more than half of the population of GTA, we have the Toronto City Manager in attendance here. Bump that up to 2/3 of the population here. These are experts in risk management, and I'm sure all of our CAOs would agree that gathering all the CAOs in just one place, it's tempting, but it might be a bit too risky in these uncertain times. So we've kept things intimate and interactive for this, our 3rd annual Regional CAOs Address. Last year, Elaine, Erin, and Gary walked us through how their respective municipalities were dealing with the challenges of housing and infrastructure in particular. They told us how the province's ambitious housing targets, coupled with new legislative and fiscal frameworks, are straining municipal resources, making it difficult to make the types of investments that are necessary to maintain strong local services. And today's presentations are all about delving further into some of these issues, providing an update on the state of the regions, as it were. So rather than present 3 different takes on one issue, our presenters have instead chosen to focus their remarks on 3 distinct, yet obviously related, and we'll get into that, related issues: the ramifications of US tariffs and the trade war, the impacts of recent changes to development charges and development charge legislation, and the continuing surge in homelessness and asylum seekers. These are issues that require immediate attention and swift action, as well as you will hear, local leadership. And I want to harp on that, emphasize that a little bit here, that notion of local leadership, because it brings to mind an IMFG paper that I was very happy to be a part of a few years back with Andre Cote, another former research manager, and Michael Fenn, who I don't see him in the room, but a legend in these circles as well that many of you know well. That was a report that we called the Playbook for Voluntary Regional Governance in Greater Toronto, which really put the spotlight on city managers and CAOs as crucial players for the future of the GTA. In a province now seemingly full of strong mayors, everyone gets to be a strong mayor these days, there is a tendency to focus our attention on political leaders and the role that they play in driving policy forward, to operate, as we say in academic parlance, as policy or civic entrepreneurs. But in the paper, we argue that some of the best policy entrepreneurs can be found among our city managers and CAOs, leaders like we have here with us today. And that's because, I would argue, I don't think we'll put the words in their mouths, but I would argue that unlike their political counterparts, CAOs are masters of both making sense and responding to the immediate challenges in front of them, while also anticipating and preparing for what comes next. And so with that in mind, it's my pleasure to turn things over to this great panel of CAOs to tell us more about just that, what's in front of us, and what comes next, beginning with Elaine to tell us the story of Durham Region.
Great, thanks. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for coming out on such a lovely Friday afternoon. One year, maybe the 3 of us will come and we'll only have good news, but that seems to be a little bit off right now. So I am very pleased to be here. I did forget it was Friday the 13th, but we'll hope that's a good omen for us. So as CAOs, we know that the issues facing our communities rarely stay within our municipal borders. Tariffs and trade disruptions are a primary example of global decisions that have very real impacts on the services we deliver, the businesses we support, and the residents that we serve. Today, I want to share how regional municipalities have been navigating these challenges, working to strengthen our community's resilience, protect local jobs, and ensure our economy remains stable and strong. I'll also highlight how collaboration across all orders of government, federal, provincial, and municipal, has been essential in shaping our response. While the challenges are significant, so too are the opportunities for partnership and action. By working together, we can ensure that our communities are prepared for whatever comes next. Oh, okay. Perfect, thank you. Just a little bit of background. Canada and the US, as many of you likely know, share one of the world's largest trading relationships. Every day, over 2.5 billion in goods and services cross the border, supporting about 8 million USA jobs. For many businesses, both Canadian and American, this trade isn't optional. It's a necessity. That's why any change in trade policies has a ripple effect. As regions are so closely tied to the US economy, municipalities in Southern Ontario feel those impacts firsthand. When tariffs hit aluminum and steel, automotive, agriculture, and energy, the effect reached every corner of our community, from the family buying groceries, to the contractor pricing a home renovation, to the manufacturer deciding whether to expand operations. The ongoing tariff threat and constantly shifting policy changes have created an environment of uncertainty that's having real-world impact on communities like ours. While families struggle with higher costs, our local businesses face a double squeeze. They're dealing with reduced profits from higher input costs, while simultaneously seeing lower revenues as consumer spending drops. Supply chain disruptions and trade flow issues have become the new normal, making it difficult for business to plan and invest in growth. The uncertainty leads to a decreased investment in the community and, unfortunately, job losses and layoffs, and directly affect families. While businesses can't expand or must contract, the entire community feels the impact. For regional government, these factors directly impact community health and safety, as well as many of the services that we have to deliver. The ongoing tariff situation in the US is extraordinary, and governments at every level are working hard to respond. However, no single order of government is able to address these issues on its own. Internationally, Canada is working through diplomatic channels to negotiate with the US, explore new trade opportunities internationally, and implement retaliatory counter-tariffs on US goods. These efforts are about protecting Canadian interests while keeping trade lines open. Provincially and federally, actions have been taken to begin removing interprovincial trade barriers, which we're hearing a lot about in the media these days. A new $5 billion trade impact program has been established to support Canadian exporters. An effort is being put into promoting tools that are already in place that could help businesses find opportunities beyond the US market. Regional governments like York, Peel, and Durham are working closely with organizations like MARCO, the Mayors and Regional Chairs of Ontario, AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Through MARCO, we're aligning municipal concerns with federal and provincial priorities, ensuring tariff impacts on municipal infrastructure are part of the conversation. AMO has many activities underway to address the tariffs, including making the case that Ontario municipalities must be a critical part of stimulus spending, including funding for municipal capital projects and investing in social housing. It's thought that as the real estate market is relatively slow, an investment in social housing at this time will certainly go towards keeping our trades occupied and employed at this difficult time. Finally, FCM continues to advocate at the federal level. They led a virtual listening exercise to gather input from across the country, and they're working closely with Global Affairs Canada to prevent and mitigate tariff impacts. So now we'll go on to municipal budgets. For municipalities, tariffs could result in reduced revenues and higher costs across every aspect of our service delivery, whether it's materials for infrastructure projects, the vehicles on our fleet, IT service and consultations, water treatment chemicals, energy, and even social services. AMO has estimated that the trade war and broader economic fallout will result in a $1.8 billion fiscal impact on Ontario municipalities from 2025 to 26. And the timing of this could not be worse as we work to reach our housing goals. Housing enabling infrastructure projects that are critical to meeting our shared commitments to building 1.5 million new homes by 2031 now face sudden cost increases and supply chain disruptions. Mayors, chairs, and councils across the country are actively evaluating every tool at their disposal, including strategic municipal procurement approaches, to respond effectively to these tariff challenges. As we navigate this difficult period, we have a responsibility to take measures that ensure a stronger Canada emerges from this crisis. Most importantly, we must recognize that real, sustainable economic growth is built by investing in communities, both urban and rural. The foundation upon which Canada's economic resilience is built is in local communities. In terms of specific tariff responses, I use Durham as an example, but generally we've tried to take a kind of global effect to how regions are approaching this challenge. We're moving in step with others to ensure a coordinated and effective response to tariffs. Similar to York and Peel, Durham Region has been actively working to mitigate the impacts of tariffs in a variety of ways, both corporately and as partners with our business community. Our focus is on supporting Durham businesses, protecting Canadian jobs and Canadian-owned companies, and maintaining essential services for our communities. Since February, our interdepartmental tariff response group has brought together senior leadership from across our region for weekly meetings to ensure that we are addressing impacts comprehensively, from procurement of services delivery to long-term service planning. This group provides regular updates to our council, ensuring that elected officials have the necessary data and information to make informed decisions. We're also looking to expand trade. In March, a delegation of staff and elected officials from the province and numerous municipalities, including York and Durham, participated in an investment mission to Hanover, Germany, the Hanover Messe Congress. And the objective of this was really to begin introducing our communities to broader supply chains on a more international basis. Finally, our financial teams and our legal teams across regions are working together to look at impacts on our capital plans and how those plans may need to be prioritized and changed in the face of tariffs, while ensuring that we can continue to make our infrastructure priorities. For purchasing, Durham Region has implemented a strategic restrict U.S. business approach rather than a buy Canadian policy. We've restricted U.S. businesses from bidding, with exceptions where they're the sole viable source or where restrictions would have operational disruptions. Here's where we differ from the provincial approach. We've defined a U.S. business as one headquartered in the U.S. with no Canadian employees. Our council was clear: regional policies must protect the maximum number of Canadian jobs, regardless of where the employer's headquarters is located. Like York and Peel and other municipalities, we've taken a measured approach that avoids curtailing competition, driving up prices, or limiting supply availability, while aligning with federal and provincial direction and diversifying supply chains. Regarding U.S. products, we haven't implemented a full ban. Instead, we have advised companies of our preference to avoid U.S. goods and requiring them to take commercially reasonable steps in sourcing alternatives. And my last slide on the municipal tariff response is public procurement, as many of you know, rests on fundamental principles of openness, fairness, and transparency that delivers value for taxpayers' dollars. Our contractor management approach preserves these principles while adapting to tariffs. And as we all know, those of us that are in the public sector, it's when we vary from these objectives or principles that we generally get in a fair bit of trouble. So within the region, our staff have been well-trained and are paying close attention to various contracts and contract amendments that are coming in to ensure that any tariff impacts are real and proved. We're also reviewing to ensure that some of our suppliers are not taking advantage of permission orders that will exempt them from tariffs on Canadian goods. We want to ensure essentially that they're not double dipping. Sounds a little cynical. We don't think many of them are, but we're finding under these fiscal pressures, it's important to do proper due diligence on contract amendments and procurement processes. The last thing I want to talk about is a little bit of how we're dealing with the business community, and that is beyond our internal government response. We recognize that true resilience requires partnership across all sectors. That's why across the GTA, regional governments are creating, or in some cases, reactivating economic task forces. These were originally started during the pandemic, so one of the fortunate things coming out of the pandemic is much of the business response to help address tariffs can replicate some of the work that was undertaken to keep businesses sustainable during the pandemic. These task forces are powerful alliances that bring together economic development teams, local municipalities, boards of trade, chambers of commerce, and our post-secondary institutions. This collaborative approach allows us to leverage diverse experience and resources while ensuring our business community doesn't face these challenges alone. We're working directly with local businesses on the ground, taking a solution-focused approach and connecting businesses with critical resources and opportunities wherever possible. One of the programs that's been very beneficial in Durham is the Industrial and High-Density Residential DC Deferral Program, which provides immediate relief, financial relief to eligible developers. They're able to defer their development charges for up to 5 years with a view of supporting economic growth and getting some development underway. The response to business was immediate and practical across the GTHA. Most regions launched one-stop digital resources, providing the latest tariff news, response strategies to changing tariffs, and shared resources with the business community that could help them stabilize their organization. This centralized hub cuts through the noise and delivers actionable information where businesses need it most. One thing we did hear about when we were out in the community is great confusion, especially amongst smaller and medium-sized businesses with the rate of change and the daily changes with respect to tariff policy. Recognizing the critical importance of reducing dependency on single markets, task force members regularly host virtual information sessions, helping local exporters explore and enter new international markets. These sessions provide practical guidance on trade agreements, market entry strategies, and regulatory requirements, transforming tariff challenges into expansion opportunities. In Durham and in many other regions, we've also launched a Shop in Durham promotional campaign, picking up from what was done in the pandemic to encourage individuals to invest in their own community. So as municipal leaders, we understand that while global trade issues like tariffs are beyond our direct control, the impact lands squarely in our communities, on our residents, our businesses, and the services that they rely on. That's why we need to work together, municipalities, provinces, and the federal government, to ensure that the tools, funding, and policy levers are in place to protect essential services, support jobs, and keep our critical infrastructure projects on track. Thank you very much, and I look forward to continuing this important discussion.
Wonderful. So we'll move on now. Again, traveling westward to York Region. We'll invite Erin up to talk about the story of York Region. Come on up, Aaron.
I don't know, maybe we should rebrand this afternoon Misery Loves Company, because Gary and Elaine and I certainly have lots of information and challenges to share with you all this afternoon. As Gabe said, I'm going to talk about DCs and the nexus with housing affordability, if indeed that nexus exists. And I'd say across our 3 regions, while we face these challenges in different ways, I think we're all grappling with similar pressures of balancing budgets while addressing the growing demand for both affordable and attainable housing. So my aim this afternoon is just to open up a bit of a conversation about those issues, share some of the strategies that we're considering, and really wrap up with some thoughts on the vital need for collaborative advocacy on housing and infrastructure delivery. Just do a bit of a trip through what's going on with development charges, how we're responding, and where we're going to go from here. So I'm not sure whether or not I should be starting here with this crowd. You all probably are well versed in the School of Development Charges, but I do want to cover it because much of the rhetoric that we hear today seems to belie any degree of knowledge about development charges. So maybe this is more for me to get off my chest than it is to educate you. I want to start with the fact that development charges are a tool that were created by the province in the first place. They help cities and regions cover the cost of new infrastructure. And I want to underscore that. They're a cost recovery tool. Think roads, water, wastewater, transit, the infrastructure that makes the quality of life that you enjoy in the GTA possible and indeed makes growth possible throughout our regions. So the rule of thumb that Gary and Elaine and I use is growth should pay for growth. But it doesn't always work out that way, and we're going to talk about that. In York Region, DCs cover only about 2/3 of what we need to support growth, and the rest is supported by either the water rate or the tax levy. So, there's some controversy, I'd say right now, about why wouldn't we just use the tax base or user rates to pay for it all. And I want to underscore with you that those revenue sources are meant to fund our day-to-day services and not the new big ticket infrastructure to get them there. And so the bottom line here is if we don't collect enough development charge revenue, we fall behind in the infrastructure that's needed to service and support growth. There's no doubt, I've already said it, and it's worth restating, development charges are under the microscope like never before. I mean, politically, publicly, we're seeing some kind of discourse on development charges in the press every day. And I'd say at this point, there's some outright targeting on this source of revenue. Just in the past year, there's mounting pressure to reduce them. The federal government, for example, has proposed cutting DCs in half for multi-unit residential housing, and that's a big shift, and it's gaining traction. At the same time, industry voices, if they weren't loud enough already, they are getting louder. Groups like Build, OREA, ResCon, and the Ontario Home Builders Association are all pointing to fees and charges, including DCs, as a major factor in housing costs. Some say they make up 30 to 40% of the price of a new home, and I'm here to disabuse you of that notion. That's a powerful message. It is resonating politically and publicly, and these groups are not just speaking up, they're pushing for change. And recently we've seen even the Conference Board of Canada weigh in with their recent report called Balancing Growth and Affordability. that while, I think summarily acknowledging that DCs are necessary, they say they are contributing to affordability inequities, and in their view, stating that homeowners are carrying too much of the infrastructure cost burden. So what does it mean for Gary and Elaine and me? It means that the pressure is on to rethink development charges, and the advocacy is strong. I'd say the sound bites are quite sharp, and the momentum is building. And we know, as municipal leaders, we have to come up with the right fiscal strategy to make sure that our growth capital plans don't suffer. Because what we know, and Elaine alluded to it, in these tariff times, the cost of infrastructure is indeed rising, and it's affected by many growth and economic factors. And if we don't have the right funding tools in place, we risk falling behind on that very infrastructure. So excited I dropped my clicker. So development charges, we all know this equation. They're a cost recovery tool. The way we calculate them really matters. And so the calculation starts with the total cost we need to recover. And in York Region, I'm just using York Region as an example here, that includes 3 key components. First of all, we need to account for the infrastructure that's already been built but not yet fully paid off. And that's where our outstanding debt comes in, the existing debt, that's the cost of which still needs to be paid off. Second, we need to add all the costs for all the new infrastructure that we need to support growth right out to 2041. And for our region, you can see here that's $16.2 billion. And then we subtract about $8 billion, and that reflects the costs that can't be recovered through DC's grants and subsidies, things inside baseball that we call benefit to existing and post-period benefit, and costs that exceed the average level of growth. So with these adjustments, you can see we're left with the numerator just over $5 billion in recoverable costs, and we manage all that through our borrowing and long-term fiscal strategy, which Bill Hughes in this room was the master of when he worked for York Region. Finally, we divide that by the amount of growth we expect, and you can see the 500,000 new residents and the non-res space that we see in the denominator there, and that's how we arrive at the development charge rate in a very transparent, very negotiated, very I think above board way. And so this is the calculation. Just want to switch gears and talk about debt in a bit more detail. We use debt to bridge the timing gap because we all know we need to flush the toilet as soon as we move into a house, so we need to put the pipes in the ground before the houses get built. So we issue debt to bridge that timing gap. And in our region, DC's funded $1.9 billion in debt. That's about 95% of our total debt. And 60% of that debt is allocated to our top 10 housing enabling infrastructure projects. In Peel, you can see it's just a bit lower than ours at 1.8, and in Durham, an outstanding $0.1 billion. Well done, Elaine. And I think we note here that it's important for each region to receive our DCs. You know, we've already gone to the markets, we've borrowed the money, we've taken on the debt. That's regional risk, and we need those development charge revenues to come in the door to pay down this debt, as well as the cost for new capital. So here, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but just using the single and semi-detached units as an example, here are DCs across a few local municipalities in our 3 regions. And I'd say these rates are the posted rates. DCs are changing by the day in the GTA, and some municipalities listed here have discounted their rates. So on average, just to bottom line this for you, single and semi-detached units, for those kind of units, York DCs make up under 60%, 57% of the share of the total DC and parkland fee. In Peel, the average is 51%, and in Durham, it's 58%. So the bottom line is in our regions, the total of local and regional fees, including DCs, are just under 10% of the price of a new home, not the aforementioned percentages that some of you may be reading in the newspaper. And while we're facing these substantial infrastructure pressures, we're dealing with housing affordability. This, to us, isn't about numbers and policies. It's about real people, real young people, real seniors that want to downsize, and how they can stay in our communities and afford housing. We are dealing with a housing affordability crisis, and just showing you here where housing has been over the last decade. So let's use a definition of housing affordability. Housing is affordable when a household spends 30% or less of its gross income to maintain it. So 30%, keep that in mind. So as you can see here on this graph, increases to incomes have not kept pace with housing price increases. For example, in our region over the last decade, the average family income increased by 40%, while during that same time, the average cost of a resale home increased by 127%. And yes, I know you can do the math, more than 3 times the income increases. And you can see here that Durham and Peel are in a similar situation. So our inevitable conclusion is as the spread gets wider, it becomes more difficult for people to afford housing. So I just want to cover 2 snapshots of affordability levels for both housing ownership and rental, and the potential impact that DC reductions could have on these ownership and rental situations. So here you can see the average price of new homes across our regions. As I mentioned, housing's affordable, 30% or less of a family income to maintain it. So average housing prices do vary across our regions, but for the purpose this afternoon, I've just given you a middle ground of the 3 averages across our regions. So households with a median income somewhere between $129,000 and $156K, they can afford a home that costs up to just over $500,000, $540,000. And for example, a pharmacist and a plumber, they would make a combined income in that range. And then a family that makes $297,000 is in the top 10% of earners in York Region. And assuming, let's set aside, we're just going to assume they can make the minimum down payment, they could afford a home at just over $1 million. And that is more than the average condo costs in our region, but a lot less than the average single-family home. So looking at the average cost of housing, the new ownership market is unaffordable to moderate households, moderate income households. And here's the same information, but for the rental market. Across our regions, average monthly rental for a newly available 1-bedroom ranges from somewhere in the $1,400 range up to $2,000. It ranges from $1,700 to $2,300 for a 2-bedroom, and you can see the numbers for the 3-bedroom units. So the situation's a bit different here. Unlike the ownership market, those that can afford rental housing include most of our low and moderate income households. And also, unlike the ownership market, purpose-built rental units on average are affordable to moderate and high income earners, which include incomes above $156,000. And households in the top 10% of income earners can afford housing costs up to $7,400 a month. So just a much more positive picture here. And we've known and we've heard from many. I know Benny Telf, the economist for CIBC, showed up at our committee meeting recently and is a very strong advocate of more purpose-built rental. And I'd say the key advantage to supporting more purpose-built rental through DC deferrals is that we're influencing the overall financial viability of the building and not working to affect the affordability of individual units. So let's talk about our progress and the work ahead, specifically on purpose-built rental. I think you can see we're making some progress that the purple line shows you over the last decade. Purpose-built rental development is rising, but clearly not enough to support the housing gaps. Back, more than a decade ago, it was less than 5% of the new houses across our 3 regions, and now it's about 10%, but definitely a ton of more work to do. And in many areas, the secondary rental market has stepped in to meet demand. And in our region specifically, 21% of rental units are in the primary market, with 80% in the secondary market, with units like basement apartments and condos not captured here. So the message is, while we've made progress, there's definitely more to do to make sure that everyone has stable and an affordable place to call home. So with housing affordability under pressure and no new sustainable funding coming to our regions, we are stepping up to do what we can and develop some DC strategies. And I think it's safe to say we're all at different places in that journey. In York Region, we've taken some action to support housing for ground-related. We're delaying DC collections from subdivision approval to building permit. That all is in an effort to give developers more time to pay. And just yesterday, our council had several hours of debate on more options, like extra deferrals for non-luxury rentals and a rebate for first-time home buyers, subject to federal and provincial funding. And we know other regions are doing the same. Peel and Durham are also looking at deferrals, and other municipalities have taken steps to freeze or reduce their development charge rates. And these are bold moves by the municipal sector, by our region, and none of these moves are pain-free. DCs, as I think I've convinced you, they fund the infrastructure that supports growth. And deferrals mean we borrow more, and we borrow for longer. And discounts flat out reduce the revenue permanently. So unless we get that revenue and funding from other levels of government, it's harder to keep up with the infrastructure that our communities need. So we're doing our part, and I'd say we're doing more than our fair share to keep building strong and affordable communities. But we're at a point now where we just need real tangible funding commitments from senior levels of government to keep the machine moving. It was referred to earlier, but there has been new changes. You might have heard about Bill 17, which was passed in June. Some of the conditions of the bill are in effect already, and others, I think, are being consulted on over the summer. So there's a number of changes that Bill 17 proposes, the deferral of non-rental DCs to occupancy, and there is a number of technical changes, including the ability to merge DC services for issuing credits. In the area of eligible costs, the province did repeal a prior bill called Bill 23 and remove prescriptions that land costs would be ineligible for certain services. But suffice to say, there's lots of changes proposed by this bill, some of which are helpful and some of which the devil will be in the details, and we'll be consulted on that hopefully over the coming months. The comment period on this bill closed yesterday, so our region, and I know others, have provided the province with the benefit of our expertise as practitioners in the DC world, and we're sure they'll take that advice in consideration. So just in summing up, we all have a role to play, and partnerships are required with both other levels of government and with the building industry. We know senior levels of government have the greatest financial tools available to them, and continued advocacy with them is critical to secure sustained funding for our housing priorities. With housing providers, I mean, we would like to see stronger commitments that when we make changes to reduce or defer DCs, that these incentives are going to translate into housing starts in our region. I would like to see bankable forecasts from the industry and commitments to really translate these cost advantages and financing advantages into additional housing and affordable housing across our region. So a lot of work to do on the advocacy front. And I just want to leave you with this. As someone who is deeply committed through my work over the last few decades in both the public and private sectors to building the very infrastructure that makes strong and inclusive communities, I want to share this with you. We're doing everything we can in the regions and in municipalities. We're adjusting our policies, we're deferring fees, we're finding creative ways to make housing affordable, but we are reaching, if we have not already reached, the limits of what we can do alone. And we need our provincial and federal partners to step up with real sustained funding so we can build the infrastructure that supports growth and affordable housing and quality of life in our regions. And we need our partners in the development industry to come to the table with us and stop the sound bites about cut DCs or get rid of DCs. And in my view, I think that means committing to clear, bankable housing forecasts so we can better share the timing risks. And it means passing on the savings of our incentives to the people that need it most, the home buyers and the renters. Because, as I mentioned, for Elaine and Gary and me, this is not just about numbers and policies, and it should not be about public sector losses funding private sector gains. It's about people. It's about the people in our communities and the young people hoping to stay in the communities that they grew up with. So I truly believe we can build a future where everybody has an affordable house and a place to call home. And thank you for letting me share these few ideas with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Erin. It wasn't so miserable. It wasn't just all miserable and company. There was some hope at the end there and some optimism. So our final presentation from Gary.
No pressure.
Fiscal pressure.
Get my time in here. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you. Okay, so as Gabe said, I'm an accountant, so don't shoot me. But I'm really grateful for the work that Alan and Enid and IMFG do, really to create some thoughtful space for reflection. There's not too much white space in our calendars for everybody in the world just now, but you really create those opportunities, and just wanted to say thank you. But as an accountant, I learned how to talk about money. But working in local government for these last 30 years, I learned to talk about people. And just building off of what Erin said, how we treat people defines who we are as a country, a province, and how we create communities where everybody belongs. Gabe gave you some stats. We're closer to 1.7 million now, 225,000 businesses. In Peel, we've got Pearson Airport, of course. And with 69% of our residents identifying with a racialised group, we're one of the most diverse communities in Canada. 1 in 10 Ontarians live in Peel. 1 in 10 Ontarians live in Peel. Peel's a big deal, and so are the other regions. It's important to focus on what's happening there. So I'm pleased to be here today to share how Peel Region, as an example, working with the other regions, as an example of agility, is responding to 2 complex and interrelated crises focused on people: a surge in asylum claimants and a rise in homeless encampments. And these are not isolated changes, and they're connected, systemic, and growing, and often confused. And while this is Peel's story I'm going to share, the challenges are not unique. And Regions and Toronto and others across the GTHA have worked together. They're all facing similar pressures, but maybe different scales. But all our experience does point to policy gaps, deeper policy gaps, as well as emerging opportunities for shared solutions. So case study Peel. So by autumn 2023, asylum claimants made up 74% of Peel's shelter population. Our system operated at 400% capacity, forcing us to operate 16 overflow hotels. And unlike other government-assisted refugees, these claimants received little to no federal support. The immediate burden of shelter, health, and safety fell to local government with no warning or funding. And this crisis in Peel reflects a broader policy gap across the GTHA, raising urgent questions about governance, funding responsibilities, and system design. The urgency of this crisis forced rapid decisions, often with limited resources, shifting facts, and no clear roadmap. And tragically, 2 asylum claimants died while waiting for shelter. And those losses were heartbreaking for frontline staff and a community already under strain. The deaths, of course, drew intense and not always accurate media scrutiny and raised hard questions about the response. And at the same time, they risked overshadowing the tireless efforts of staff and community partners working in impossible conditions. Residents were feeling the strain across the community, and of course, they spoke out to their councillors with a mix of concern, fear, and compassion. So in cooperation with the other regions, we tried to create a hub and spoke system for asylum claims. The Peel Reception Centre provides support, and it was created within 6 months. It creates support for up to 680 individuals in one day. With a focus on single asylum claimants, we also operate 2 hotels that accommodate up to 110 families as well. This was designed for a centre of 680, but the spokes would go out and you can actually process, which is not a great word for people, you can process about 13,000 asylum claimants per year if funded. People arriving here have immediate access to healthcare, mental health support, settlement services, and other wraparound supports. And these services are designed to help people stabilise and begin to rebuild their lives. The centre was purpose-built to be a safe, welcoming, and culturally responsive space, one that puts dignity, equity, and safety at the forefront. It's the first municipal-led reception centre of its kind in Canada, not just a shelter, but a place that helps people recover and begin their transition into life in Canada. So let's take a look at the numbers for our main sheltering options. And let's face it, putting someone in a hotel isn't ideal from their own well-being, but also at $220 per person per day, it's simply not sustainable, financially or systemically. There are also ad hoc solutions that are scattered and often separated from services and supports. The reception centre model offers a balanced solution at $80 a day. It's designed specifically for asylum claimants, respects human dignity, and costs less than emergency hotels. They connect asylum claimants with the supports that they need and provide a pathway to longer-term solutions. But our long-term goal is even more sustainable. Housing subsidies at around $45 a day offer both stability and flexibility at a fraction of the cost. This response brought people together across sectors, mandates, and jurisdictions to build systems that are more responsive, more connected, and more compassionate. Government agencies, health providers, settlement services, community and faith groups each plays a vital role, and together they form a network of support that no single organisation could create alone. The more threads we weave together across government, health, community and faith sectors, the stronger our social safety net becomes and the fewer people fall through the gaps. This slide illustrates the funding shift Peel and other municipalities are facing under the federal IHIP programme, or Interim Housing Assistance Programme. You'll see the colours and read on the slide. For 25-26, the federal government has covered 95% of the costs of services that meet their criteria of sustainable and cost effective, such as longer term transitional housing. But that drops to 75% in 2026-27. And look at those services that don't make that criteria, like hotel accommodations, which are often the only option available to us due to a lack of purpose-built shelter space. For those, the federal contribution drops from 75% to 50% over the same period. That alone is challenging, but for what's most alarming is that what happens after 2027 and federal support ends altogether, shifting 100% of costs to municipalities like Peel, even though asylum claimants remain the sole responsibility of the federal government. If no changes are made, Peel's programme costs will climb to $26.33 million. That's about a 2% increase in our budget. Making matters worse, the new IHAP rules penalise municipalities for hotels, as I mentioned, even though we have no other choice. We've applied for funding to acquire a dedicated family site, which is a slightly different model than the reception centre, which would reduce the funding reliance, but it won't be enough on their own. Sustained federal partnership is still needed. It's something like this that it's this kind of pressure that can collapse social structures, because you now start to compete about what the outcome is that you need. So advocacy. Peel, we spent about $80 million and the feds paid 95% of it, due credit to them. While recent support is welcome, it remains unpredictable and it's insufficient. We're working on a presumed model that has not been confirmed. IRCC is changing the rules of the game as we go, and our local tax base was never designed to carry the costs of a global migration system. The situation is unsustainable, not just financially, but structurally. And what we're seeing is the result of policy gaps, a lack of coordination between IRCC and housing systems, and slow delivery of federal and provincial funding. So IRCC, they take care of asylum. They don't want to provide a housing subsidy. And HIC, Housing Infrastructure Communities, and something else with a C, they don't want to fund asylum seekers. So this is the conversation that we're currently having with them. We need to rethink this, how these things are shared across orders of a government and how funding follows function. We're calling on the feds to establish a long-term, sustainable, fully funded asylum system, not 95%, not 50%, but 100% of the costs, with flexibility, equitable distribution, and a long-term investment in housing, settlement, and employment. And we urge the province to reinstate and expand settlement funding. Our centre is run by Costi, which is a well-known group in the GTHA, but they've been hit hard with their budget reductions. Provide predictable investments and work with federal partners to close critical service gaps. So another light topic, encampments, and I'll just go through this one and I might skip some slides so we get back on time. So homeless encampments everywhere. I'm going to talk about Peel. While the increase in asylum claimants has added pressure to our shelter system, encampments are part of a broader and more complex housing crisis. The two issues are connected, but they're not the same, and they require distinct responses. Encampments bring a new level of visibility to Peel's housing crisis, but they represent only a small portion of the challenge. We think about 8% of our homeless population is living in encampments. The real issue is the chronic shortage of affordable and sustainable housing. So here's a quick snapshot of the scale and nature of what we're dealing with across the province. And these figures are taken from AMO's most recent report. In 2024, more than 81,000 Ontarians experienced homelessness, a 51% jump since 2016. Ontario has 268,000 households on affordable housing waitlists and just one supportive housing unit for every 14 people needing one. Collectively, all of us, provincial and municipal, Ontario is investing $4.1 billion, but half of that is on your property tax bill. It's unsustainable. The rise in encampments reflect deeper system failures in shelter capacity, immigration supports, and supportive housing. And we need to move beyond this crisis towards long-term housing-focused solutions. In Peel, homelessness has increased by 223%, and that includes asylum claimants, 93% excluding them. And of course, the needs are complex. You've heard that mental health, trauma, substance abuse. They just require more intensive coordinated care. Older adults represent a growing share of the homeless population, and now women make up 40%, many fleeing abuse or conflict, as we have intimate partner violence becoming a crisis also. And then Indigenous, racialised, and LGBTQIA2S+, I have to write that one down, communities remain overrepresented in homelessness, underscoring the need for equity-based, culturally responsive solutions. Peel's Encampment Project brought together over the last year the ability to develop a new multidisciplinary team to a balanced, risk-based approach, one that respects the needs of people living in encampments as well as the surrounding community. And our mission was to achieve a balanced encampment response that improves access to timely services for those in encampments, increase satisfaction amongst residents and businesses, raise community awareness, and ensure the safety of public spaces and strengthen communication and data. So we've developed a protocol that goes to our council next week, working with everyone and a human-first perspective. This response focuses on how to manage encampments, but the only true way to end homelessness in encampments is by increasing the supply of affordable and supportive housing. Perhaps our greatest success came from this one in Dundas Street in Mississauga. At its peak, we had 42 people living in tents. For us, a large encampment by our measure, and one we assessed as high risk. Through the encampment protocol, it's allowed us to remediate the site safely with every single resident leaving voluntarily. Some moved to shelters or overflow hotels, 3 moved directly into permanent housing, and our housing support workers remain in close contact, helping each person transition to long-term stability. And this just wasn't a service success, it reflected what's possible when people are offered dignity, support, and real options. Today in Peel, the work of our encampment response teams has resulted in a reduced average of about 25 active encampments across Peel in any given time. We believe housing is the solution to homelessness, but it must be supported. People also need access to those wraparound services, mental health, and stable long-term funding to stay housed and thrive. And so Peel Council has identified our advocacy priorities to help build that system, working with others. And we continue to call on the feds in the province to provide sustainable allocation-based funding to service managers, funding that reflects local realities and supports lasting solutions. Housing is a human right. With the right partnerships and investments, we can build a system where everyone has a safe, stable place to call home. So this is the wrong bill number now, because I think it's Bill 6. The province has reintroduced this bill just the other week. Bill 6, the Safer Municipalities Act, that basically gives law enforcement additional powers to enforce on encampments and other things around some criteria. And the feds have introduced Bill C2, the Strong Borders Act. Not enough time to get into that. But, you know, my point really is the regions and single tiers are moving quickly to solve rapidly emerging issues. We're actually good at that, but we do need the funding to follow policy at the federal and provincial levels to create the communities where everyone is respected and feels like they belong. But if I may, I would just like to share 2 short stories from the Peel Reception Centre. Prior to the influx of asylum, Paul's a 37-year-old from Nigeria. He was a geologist and has come to Canada for a better life. He comes to the Peel Reception Centre. The team supports him to apply for Ontario Works. He sees the doctor on site regarding getting medication in Canada for his diabetes, as he's lost his medication from back home while in transit to Canada, and the staff at the centre support him to fill his medications. He works with the employment agency on site and is supported with a suit and dress clothes for interviews. He's university educated and ideally would like to work in his field. The agency connects with him an organisation in North Bay that is an opening for a geologist position. He completes the interviews in the reception centre, boardrooms, and is successful through 2 rounds of interviews. The company in North Bay offers him a position and offers moving costs and setup costs. The team helps him to find accommodation and find local resources in his new community. Secondly, Fatima. Fatima's a 20-year-old from Ghana. She believes that she's 6 months pregnant, but has yet to receive any prenatal support before she came to Canada. Upon arrival at the reception centre, she's connected with the medical supports on site and public health with their healthy babies and prenatal supports. She's supported with transportation for follow-up visits, and the team works with her to find accommodations that she can move into before she gives birth. She's connected with supports in her community, including a midwife, that will support her and the baby after birth. 2 real examples, different names from the support centre. I said at the beginning that we need to create communities where everyone feels they belong. It makes me wonder what the outcome for those 2 asylum seekers what their outcome would have been at the beginning of my story presentation, who did not get access to services and perished in Peel. I think it would have been a different outcome. We can do better. We must do better. And as I said, IMFG gives a forum for thoughtful reflection, and I'll just leave you with your own thoughts in that matter. Thank you.
All right, so I will invite our panelists to come up on stage here, and we'll continue this conversation. And while we're getting set up, I'll just lead us in here and set the table. Thank you to all 3 speakers, and particularly Gary for the closing there and adding the personal touch to this, because we covered a lot of the waterfront here, many different issues, starting from global tariff impacts at the global scale. But there is a through line that connects down to the personal level, and that was a theme across all of your remarks, that at the end of the day, we're talking about our residents and our communities and people's lives and the connections there. So that through line from the tariff response and the economic uncertainty and how do we get continue to make our communities resilient from an economic perspective, which has led to a push on the DC front on development charges to try to improve affordability for those who might be struggling, et cetera, or just even those who aren't struggling, and just as an affordability issue. So there's a connection there, and then it boils over in some ways in terms of the surge, in terms of homelessness and asylum seekers, et cetera. And so there is that through line here. And so there's a lot of commonality. I have a long list of questions. I want to give some time to the folks out there to prepare their own questions, and we'll have time for that as well. I might skip over some questions because as I was thinking about these connections between all of your remarks and the observations you're making in your own particular communities, to open up a conversation, I might throw it to the group to respond to each other's presentations and experiences. I'm quite curious, watching each other's presentations and hearing the remarks, what went through your mind? Was it the exact same story that you're hearing about DCs in Peel, for example, or in Durham? How much of this is a universal story? How much of this is region by region? And if some of the experiences in the other regions might be making you think a little bit differently about your own experiences in your regions. I don't know who wants to open up here. Gary?
You know what, I think you picked up on it for me when I was listening to Elaine and Erin. It's almost as if we'd spoken to each other, because it gave me a sense of pride that at the end of the day it's about people's lives living in a community, and many of us are immigrants or have come from immigrant families, and you reflect on the journey that they had. How easy was it for them, or how difficult for them in some ways? But at the end of the day, we all spoke about the individual person. So I'm not sure I heard anything that different, because we actually meet every Friday morning.
Well, that helps.
For half an hour.
Yeah.
No, we do.
It
Started through COVID, and we spend half an hour, and we just compare notes, and I think we learn from each other every single day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, as I was listening to Gary and Elaine, it is the same circumstances that are unfolding, and I think it does show that the main issues are not isolated to any individual regions, that there is commonality, and I mean, our connections are important, because none of us can sustain an adequate response to these issues alone. So we learn from each other, we contribute to each other and the broader sector in trying to make some real change happen on the ground.
Elaine, is it you just hear echoes of what you're experiencing in Durham?
It definitely is an echo. Some communities are more mature than others, but I think we're all experiencing the same issues. Some may be farther ahead than others in addressing them. The other thing I think it's important to note is below us, there's a lot of very dedicated, qualified staff. So when dealing with things like refugees, homelessness, any crisis, there's constant contact across the GTHA and even beyond to jump in and help wherever possible. What really, two things resonated with me. I did not realize that the federal position was to reduce to 50%. That was a bit of a shocker and politically very difficult to manage, I think. And just a reiteration of how important it is to get deep, affordable, and supportive housing. And we've all been working so hard to achieve some goals on that, and really the provincial and federal government just have to come forward and put some dollars on the table to help us get there.
Pull back the curtain a little bit more, because I think it'd be a surprise to a lot of folks that you have that kind of regular 30-minute talk, which is great.
It's a safe room.
Yeah. And you know, we don't need to go into the agendas of each call, but building off of that, what are those conversations like? How often are those conversations? I don't just mean at the CAO level, but just between municipalities, between regions, because it does sound from your comments here that this is to some extent a universal story now within our broader region, not just the regional municipalities. So where do we go from there? Where's that intergovernmental collaboration, not just on an individual basis, CAO to CAO? Where do we see that happening, playing out? Because you know, a lot of folks aren't necessarily watching that space to the same degree. Elaine.
Well, maybe we have a number of structures in place. There's the regional and single tier CAOs, of which we, including Paul, are all members, and we meet regularly with the province and when we can with the feds to talk about issues, advise on legislation, regulation. But each of our core business areas also have similar tables. So, for example, the Works Commissioners have a table that meets and reports up to the CAO's table regularly. Community Services, similarly. So the conversation between regions on a formal basis is constant and regular, and I think in an informal basis probably happens on a daily basis in individual shops across our businesses.
Yeah.
I mean, the open lines of communication are just vital. I mean, I would say that the three of us are talking about something multiple times per week. I mean, this week it's been development charges, but you know, next week it'll be something else. The other thing that we've been trying is to have like bilateral team meetings across regions. So getting, say, Gary's team and my team getting us together, and then Elaine and I, our full teams, just met at an energy from waste plant that we co-own out in Durham Region. So getting together and having the opportunity to have a bit longer agendas so our teams can really discuss things in depth with the full team has been proving, I think, to be quite a fruitful thing to do. I mean, everything takes time, and like Gary said, there's not a lot of white space in our calendars, but making time to collaborate, build the trust, sustain the relationships, I think is really important in the times that we're in, because the times are changing so quickly.
Right.
I think we all feel there's maybe a wee bit too many of the groups as well, but each one of them has got its own values, so you don't want to drop that off. That'll make the other point of the relationship between the local municipalities and upper tiers. I think that's still fairly strong. So our treasurers in Peel meet quarterly, for example. Planning has been a difficult topic in Peel, with the transfer of powers and what that really means about who does what. We actually haven't been able to find common ground on that. And sometimes it gets really strained, especially in the last cycle of legislation where, you know, somebody mentioned strong mayors. You know, that's created a dynamic at the professional level of staff where some mayors are active on that from a bureaucracy point of view, and others are not. And I'm not judging, I'm just saying that's a reality. And that puts the profession under some threat, you know, a different type of stress for them to collaborate and cooperate when there's different opinions between lower tier municipalities as well. It was about a year ago, I said, after the strong mayors legislation that came in, and Peel had already been announced as being dissolved. I don't know if you heard that story. That's a different presentation. And I had a dinner at a nice restaurant in Mississauga with my CEOs at Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon. And I was pretty beaten up at the time, and I walked in, and they're fairly nice to me. And I said, well, it's kind of ironic now that come the 1st of July, it takes 13 people to fire me, but only one person to fire you. They didn't really laugh
Ironic
too much.
or amusing?
But that is, and I know Mayor Burton's standing, sitting looking at me, but I'm not referring to anything in Oakville. But that is a major threat to the public service at the local level from that piece of legislation, in my view.
All right, looking at the time, I want to make sure that there is opportunity for the audience. I believe we may have a microphone ready to go, so any questions from the room? We have one in the front here, and then 2 rows back. Mayor.
I accept debate.
So if you could just introduce yourself first to those in the audience, and then ask the question.
There's cases I don't want to get into, but have you considered that it can also work the other way, where it only takes one person to save a CAO from a larger group determined to hang them?
100%.
And P.S., I know of cases.
Yeah. No, I've got some experience of that as well. Yeah, no, it's not all bad. I think that's your point. But there's opportunities where it potentially is going to weaken the strength of the next layer down in the staff, and then who aspires. One of the things in my mind is around agility. And in order to remain agile, you're going to have to attract those great people that Elaine said. And I don't think it's my age group, or maybe even 10 years younger than me. We're in the system, we're coming through. But what about the next generation coming from university? So, and I'm on the board of CAMA, the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators. This is a big conversation for CEOs across Canada, and other provinces like Alberta are probably tipped to go next, and the whole profession just changes. But they'll be good and bad, just different.
Music to my ears for the students in the room. I see some of you, the next generation coming. So that was a question from Mayor Burton. Just to be clear to those live on the live stream, a couple rows back. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sharon Dubois, and I first of all want to commend the good progress that I'm seeing on dealing with homelessness and encampments from a much more dignified and humane perspective. I had the opportunity to visit Beaverton Heights a while ago, and ask about it, people. It's really the vision that brought that facility to being is really of interest to me. I'm wondering, we're talking about, there's lots, as you said, of discussion about development charges, mostly negative against the municipalities, but contributing to that also needs to be, I think, or involved, infecting that is the notion of permits and permit times, because the speed, as one person put it, equals supply. And so I look at the recent successes of Edmonton that has reduced their average permit time to 3 months, whereas it can be, 30-some months in Toronto. So there's vast variability there, and I'm just wondering if my understanding is they've introduced AI to help address the processes, to streamline the processes, and I'm wondering, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Little difference in the rate of property taxes in Edmonton. Torontonian. I'm from the West originally, so I don't have a lot of consideration for people in Toronto who complain about their property taxes, because I think they're obscenely low.
So we'll stick to the question about permitting and process. And maybe open it up, because you were mentioning also with the downloading of responsibility on the planning side to local municipalities to some extent, maybe it's less relevant in the current context.
It is.
But I think that the broader question here is about streamlining, right? And it speaks to the question of agility and how do we respond faster in many different areas, not just permitting, but in others. Aaron, if you want to speak to this.
I mean, you've hit it on the head with the planning download. Then that effort gets concentrated at the local municipal level and approvals from the province. So that's been a move that I think is still unfolding in terms of time implications. I'd say in York Region we have a mechanism that's called York Tracks, and for all 9 of our local municipalities, they upload the development applications even now without us being the planning approval authority, just so all 9 and the region have visibility on the application. And it also has automated workflows within it, so who's looking at it? Are there engineering comments? Does it front on a regional road? Does Public Works have to comment? So that has provided us with a way of objective time tracking amongst us and making sure that we're all getting the comments back and those approvals in place in a timely way. So there is that at play in York Region, but with the planning changes, I'd say, resources locally and resources. I've had several calls from different local municipalities saying, do you know of any planners I could hire? Because I could sure use a few more. So that's, the resourcing and the shifting in the resources is something that I think is still unfolding.
Elaine or Gary, where's your focus in terms of streamlining process, whether planning or permitting or otherwise?
We have a similar system to York in terms of tracking applications. We do regularly, we have an internal auditor whose primary role is working with the departments to do process reviews and streamline wherever possible. And we've kept that really an internal function. It doesn't report to council. It's something that directors, commissioners can go to when there's something keeping them up at night to make sure that we are as streamlined, effective, and accountable as possible. I feel the need to point out the other side of that story also, though. Yes, sometimes our processes need improved. There's no question. There's always room for improvement. But also, there's times when you get incomplete applications, or applications coming in bits and pieces, and there's not much that a municipality can do without all of the information on the table. I also just want to thank you for visiting Beaverton Heights. It's something we're very proud of.
And go Oilers as well. So I mean, the change for us was, similar, and but the regions still have a role in planning infrastructure at scale across municipalities. I think that's been one of the lost messages in all of this. So no longer will the region approve the local OP. They send it to the province sends it to us and asks us for comments on it, because we provide roads and we provide utilities, and all that thing is very important. I say to my colleagues locally, we need to comment from a water perspective. You wouldn't allow, because you can't just plug into the system. Electra wouldn't allow you to plug in to there without them having a say on it. It's the same thing. So the notion that planning has disappeared from the regions is really false, but certain elements have, and those have been transferred, and it has got faster. And Brampton and Mississauga published their rates, and it's been faster. They've done lean reviews. We've done lean reviews. We understand the ask, and we've responded to it.
Great. We have time for one, and if we're quick, 2. We can squeeze in 2 questions, but let's start with 1. Final question from the group. Yes, sir. Just a moment. Got the microphone there for you, and if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Alex Cross. I think it was Gary who initially, in the introduction, had this chart showing the number of refugees, how they've increased over the last couple of years. And so, given that they are refugees, they are coming from outside Canada, and you would think that certainly the federal government, having Canadian border services and so on and so forth, there certainly would play a role in terms of, receiving them and then So I was just wondering whether, you know, in terms of, so in that sense, you could probably do like analysis, some kind of a flow analysis where the different people are coming from, and
Yeah.
you know what's in some sense a natural responsibility would be,
Yeah.
rather than.
So, I mean, I'll make a comment and then others, because we've all worked on this, and Paul was a part of it as well, to advocate for funding. So it just happened to land in Peel, which is obviously close to the airport. So we've had visits from the former minister of IRCC. We've had visits from Newfoundland. They're looking at Ottawa and they think they might scale up, but that's not quite there yet. So we're grateful for that. But if there's no funding, there'll be nothing to scale up, basically. And actually, refugees is like water, which is another big, the planning thing for DCs. Because nobody's building houses just now, you have to keep building the pipes. Because in 7 years, when people are building houses, the pipes better be there. So the costs are right now. And for refugees, you have to build the infrastructure, because Canada is a peaceful, welcoming society, and we love that about Canada. So you've got to be ready when the next crisis happens. And it's been Gaza, it's been Palestine, it's been Ukraine, it's been Syria, it's been Afghanistan. There's a steady diet and it's unpredictable. It took us 6 months to stand this up. And if the infrastructure is there, when the crisis comes, we'll be ready. And when there's not a crisis, we can use it for our local homelessness. So there's a lot of work to be done right now for things that might not materialize until a few years out.
And to highlight again, as you said, that came together through regional collaboration across regions as well, right? That
Yeah,
wasn't
and
just
local,
a Peel
No,
project.
for sure.
Yeah. So with that, I'll hand it back to Enid for some closing remarks.
But I want to start by thanking all of four of you, Elaine, Aaron, Gary, and Gabe, for moderating. Somebody talked about white space in your calendars, and I know there isn't much, and so even if it's Friday afternoon, we're happy to have it. So thank you very much for being here. You know, the topics seem different, and we kind of related them a bit, but I think there were a few themes that came out, and one of the themes that we talked about through all presentations was the need for collaboration, and not just federal, provincial, and local governments, but also collaboration with the private sector. And that came out in all of the presentations, how important that collaboration is. The other theme that came out was funding, right? I mean, you cannot do this on the property tax. You need other sources of funding, and not just development charges either, but federal and provincial funding. But the third theme that came out for me was the incredible commitment of these three regional CAOs to what they're doing. And a commitment not to the dollars, not to the numbers, but a commitment to people. And we just really appreciate the work you do, and we're just delighted you came here today. Thank you very much. One last note, this event was videoed, and so the video will be on our website in the coming days, and the slides will also be on our website very soon. And thank you all for coming. Have a great evening and have a great weekend.